Welcome to Rak'Adventures. I'm Raka, and these are adventures. And yes, I think I'm very clever. This series is going to seek to relive and re-examine many of the adventure modules of gaming's past, to hopefully re-experience some small part of the magic our first times these modules, or, for those of you that were too busy doing things like not being born yet, wipe the past away from these treasures and let you experience a story that would otherwise have passed you by, cloaked in the mists of decades. Today, for this inaugural episode, we're going all the way back to 1979 to an adventure penned by Gary Gygax himself. Now, this is not the first adventure ever published. That honor went to Setting of the Hill Giant Chief, published by TSR in 1978, or, if you look beyond first-party content, The Palace of the Vampire Queen, published by We Warriors in 1976. But today's adventure is credited with being the first official module to pull Dungeons & Dragons out of the dungeon and begin the transformation from a game of miniatures and survival into the robust role-playing game we all enjoy today. This adventure saw our players arrive in a town plagued with doubt and unspoken concern. A formless, nameless evil lurked just beyond the obvious that seemed known to all the party would interact with, but few seemed willing to put their worry into words, leaving the parties mutely aware that something unsettling lurked just beyond the town's borders, but frustratingly blind in their attempts to maneuver around the unseeable threat. I speak, of course, of the village of Hommlet, precursor module to the Temple of Elemental Evil. However, remember how I said this show was about re-examining and re-experiencing the module? I can't really talk about experiencing the module. I've read the booklet cover to cover. I know every nuance. And in a module built in order to maneuver around the unseen and the unknown, I can't really talk definitively about what it is to experience that. So instead, let me turn it over to my PC, Rash'thyr, for her experience in encountering this unsettling locale. The dust of the road would not get off me. It had been like 6 days since I left Instad, traveling northwards towards Verbabon, traveling through the metal-rich Cron Hills. And if you know anything about metal-rich areas, you know that a lot of dust gets kicked up by those trying to get that metal out. Most of it ended up getting on me. The day was long. The sun was beginning to flit playfully upon the western horizon. But recent hours had increasingly begun to replace the arid and dust-blown landscape with the plant-strewn ground and distant farmlands. This was not a precursor to Verbobon, I knew that, but at least it meant I was coming up on a village, and a village meant hot food and a wash basin. Hommlet the Hamlet was the hot food repository I found. Okay, so technically it's a village, but come on, Hommlet the Hamlet just works, doesn't it? Truth be told, I saw this as very, very little other than a place to get some hot food, a bed, and be out the next morning. I was on my way to Verbobon because, hello, big city, big money, big adventure. You don't get anywhere hanging out in little ho-hum little hamlets, or at least that's what I thought. I kinda was wrong on this one, and that's called foreshadowing. Anyway, I get to Hommlet, and people are giving me the stink eye right away. I shouldn't have been surprised. Walk around with horns on your head and red skin in rural areas. Everyone thinks you're a demon. But over time, I kind of learned to deal with that. First two people I see are a couple of well-fed elderly farmers who didn't really look like they were in their prime to be out plowing the fields. But that's okay. They had a young'un behind him and some hired help on the side. Old guy looks at me the way you might look at a dog that you're not quite sure if it has fleas, but his wife gestures her head down the road.
Inns that way. They got people who are paid to talk to you traveler types. Lord only knows I wouldn't want to do it. Got a layabout kid there, Elbow. Never quite grew out of the kid's stories of heroes and dragons. I reckon he'll want to pick that outsider brain of yours, but I got the good sense not to talk to strangers. I'll be right thankful if you don't make me do so further.
Back in a compliment, if I ever heard one, but hey, if this life has taught me anything, it was if someone tells you they're not interested in a gab, you're not going to change their mind. Someone's getting a bit low in any case, and a friendly face is better than none. So, I head down the road the lady indicated. I passed down another farm, with a dog making absolutely sure everyone in earshot knew he saw someone he didn't know, and, well, seeing as that was pretty clearly not the inn, decided to pass that building and its barking dog right on by. Short bit later, I get to the inn proper. Oh, and it's everything an inn should be. Buxom beauty on a wooden sign, bustling interior, bunch of folks with little in the way of entertaining diversions, and so all they've got to do with their late hours is lose themselves in a bottle. And sure enough, there's Elmo. Elmo was big, big in a way that only a man raised on oats and field work can be. Kind of man you call if a drawbridge collapses. Not because he was tall enough to be a substitute, but because he could probably toss you across. Elmo looked at me for a long, discerning second, and then a drunken grin spread across his face.
Hey, red girl, I ain't seen you before. I'd have remembered. Come here. Let me buy you water.
Okay, so water is usually free, but I needed to talk to him anyway, so there was no reason not to go sit down.
Yeah, still got it.
He muttered, grinning at me with all the subtlety of a wildfire. I ran into your folks, said you liked talking to people from the outside. I wasn't about to encourage this current line of conversation.
Sure do, sure do. Look, nothing ever happens here, right? Like, every time travelers come in, you bring stories, you bring adventure, you bring action and new food. Never, never pass up the chance to talk to a traveler.
He slapped my back in that way that big men always do, just to send you slightly sprawling.
I'm Elmo, by and by. Strong man with man at arms. Ma and Pa don't want me out there being Hommlet right now, but if you're doing any adventurous stuff, you see about getting Elmo some armor and a big axe. Not one of them dinky little woodcutter axes, mind you. I mean an axe to make cords sit up and take notice. You get those to me, and I'm in for a brawl and a story, alright?
I smiled. The man's self-confidence was infectious, and I promised to keep that in mind. Two of us stayed up well into the night and talked of tales of adventure, stories of spicy dishes. I think he made up half the stories he told, but they were entertaining regardless, and that's all I was looking for. Next morning, I'm out of bed with the sun, and let me tell you, that was not my choice. Seems these tiny farm villages don't really know how to sleep in, and boots on hardwood flooring definitely hampered my sleep. But, I was planning on getting out of the place early, wasn't I? I got out of the inn, walking right past one of the innkeeper's daughters, who pretended to be cleaning, but I'm pretty sure was there to make sure no one filched anything. Heading out, I began making my way north along the road, intent on following it all the way to Verbobon. As fortune would have it, the northern road took me right past a nondescript trader. The building was boarded up and reinforced, and it didn't exactly feel welcoming, but hell, if they gave me some fresh bread and some cheese, that'd go a hell of a lot further than trail rations. Unsurprisingly, like everyone else in this glorified farmer's market, proprietors were already up and active, even with only half the sun clearing the horizon. Greetings, greetings, what are you doing here? I wanted some supplies? From the supply store?
Supplies, yes, supplies. That is, after all, why you would come to a trader's abode. Of course, of course. Tell me, what does he want? More nails? Fresh cheese? Oh, and socks. Always, always he's wanting socks. I told him, didn't I tell him, Davy? I told him that living in a ruin was just asking for trouble.
I hesitated for a moment, mind slightly reeling, and then I remembered what Elmo had said. I smiled. Actually, socks are good for the moment, but cheese, yes. And, do you happen to have some oversized armor and an axe? Biggest axe you can get me? I returned my coin purse and glanced up, grinning. Does he have a tab? Can give you anything to cover it, but, well, you know how he can be.
Little red girl comes bearing armor and a mystery. That's like
Elmo grinned broadly and looked at his plate.
meat and potatoes. so, so look, we should look into this. And to do that, we gotta talk to old Bunny Buns. He's amazing and smart. And he knows things. Come on.
Then Elmo grabbed my hand and physically pulled me towards the door. Have you ever, had to take a dog for a walk and it strained against the leash? It was like that, except the dog was a St. Bernard and your shoes were hooves. Great for staying balanced on weird surfaces, but not at all great for digging your heels in, seeing as you didn't have heels. Elmo proceeds to take us to a great watchtower that dominated the skyline. Eventually, we get to the top of the tower where a lithe man with a fastidious attention to his own finery looked at us, as well as a gruff man who seemed completely uninterested in his own appearance, with the sole exception of his exquisitely groomed mustache. The two looked at Elmo and I as we walked in. The lithe man wearing an expression of pain tolerance, while Mustache seemed grateful for any distraction from the papers on his desk.
Hey, so, Red Girl.
Did he seriously not remember my name?
He found something suspicious. She went to the merchant guy, man's, and they assumed she was there to pick up an order for some guy in a damp ruin. Hold on.
Mustache held up a gauntleted hand.
First, who is she? Who are you?
Rash'thyr Naveen?
Where'd you come from and why are you here?
I'm coming north from Instad. I'm heading for Verbabank.
How do you know the traders?
I don't. Rufus, please. Elmo is clearly giving us valuable intel. Don't treat the girl like a captured bandit. The lithe man sighed, held up a hand to his chest in a very melodramatic reading. Hello, dear. I am Burn. His most worshipful mage of Hommlet, Burn, technically. But let's not strain the air with all those syllables, yes? Now, from what I hear, the two traders thought you represented an unknown man in a damp ruin. Burn waited exactly long enough for me to have started to answer before pointing at the map. Seems like that means the ruined moat house to me. We cleared some bandits out of the place a few years back, as I recall. Perhaps some other miscreants have taken the place?
Well, we ain't sending soldiers there.
The man called Rufus answered, crossing his arms.
This demon-looking girl shows up, says those shifty merchants assume she was part of some unknown group. I'm not about to put a good soldier's health on the line for her word. I trust her less than a stranger.
Oh. Well, I don't know that I agree, but there is merit in caution. But hey, Rash'thyr, was it? You had already accepted. What if you went and took a little look-see?
Well, I'm coming too.
Elmo clapped a meaty fist to his hand.
If there's a face that needs punching, my fist is eager to weigh in. Ha ha ha!
I looked from Burn to Elmo, deeply regretting I hadn't just left the village when I had the chance. But eventually I just nodded. I mean, sure, I'll see what's there, I guess. Splendiferous, Burn replied, doing another of his self-indulgent bows. Then we turned to leave the room.
One moment. Demon girl.
I'm a tiefling.
Let me see a hoof.
What? The man actually looked under my foot and inspected my hooves? Whatever he was looking for he didn't find, and we began to very quickly head out of the tower. Rufus. What?
Well, when Mark buys a horse, he always looks under the hooves.
She isn't a horse, Rufus. She's a tiefling. Besides, you're not buying her.
Yeah, I just didn't want her to think I was a pushover. Now she'll tell her suspicious friends that Rufus is going to let things slide.
It took most of the morning to make our way to the moat house. Thankfully, Elmo knew about where it was or would have taken me twice that. While there was a trail that led to the place, it was overgrown with thick vegetation that betrayed many years of disuse, nearly being reclaimed by the wilds. The moat house itself followed suit, the roof having caved in some time ago, reducing the structure to a single floor, as the towers and parapets had fallen low. Many of the outer walls sat forgotten and unrepaired, still collapsed inward as part of some great siege from years before. I tossed a questioning glance to Elmo, but he simply shrugged and said,
Well, that's the moat house.
Terribly helpful. Still, We had agreed to look the place over, and so we began to make our way towards the ruined garrison. The land felt wrong. Light reflected across beady eyes of various creatures sunk into the mire, and I felt like they might be considering attacking. Beast attacks weren't unheard of, but this didn't feel like a starving wolf or a territorial owlbear. These creatures felt malevolent, eager to kill for the sensation alone. A drawbridge should shattered and collapsed, the two rotted halves meeting in the brackish water that they were supposed to allow passage above. I let out an unintentional laugh, remembering what I had said that Elmo was the type of guy you'd call for this situation, and hey, here he was. Moving into the shattered gatehouse, we could hear the structure shift slightly as unseen movement from whatever had taken up residence seemed to maneuver around in response to our presence. Distant, directionless skittering seemed to emanate from the very air around us and continuously put us on edge. Whatever it was, though, it seemed content to watch from whatever hole or rafter it occupied, and we were able to move about in unmolested tension. In the rear of the main room, a relatively well-maintained wooden door sat in stark contrast to the rest of the structure, showing signs of repair at some point in the years between whatever battle had laid this place low and today. Emma and I glanced at each other, but then I ducked inside, finding the door slightly ajar. That was a mistake. Almost immediately, I felt a strong arm on my right hand, followed nearly immediately by a painful wrenching sensation as I found my arm abruptly behind my back and myself bending halfway forward. Wait! Wait, the two merchants from Hommlet sent us? We have cheese and dry socks? Just my arm relaxed a bit, the tiniest bit, and the largest of the men we found inside the chamber walked up to me. There was a long delay as he seemed to look me up and down, taking the horns and the tail.
You ain't look much like a delivery girl,
He muttered. This ain't look like much of a farmstead. I can't be sending minnows into deep water. He looked confused, and I reconsidered my use of metaphor in the future. Still, he shrugged, looked over to his right, at a girl that seemed to be his second.
Check her bags.
Yeah, got cheese and those damn wool socks Davy always sends. Get 'em wet and they'll be wet for days. Swear it's a damn racket. Make us keep needing more of 'em.
Fine.
The man agreed, nodding at me, or actually at the guy holding me as the tension on my arm eased to nothing.
Come on. You lot'll need to talk to the boss.
The basement level of the moat house had fared far better over the years than the collapsed upper floors. That was good, but unfortunately the basement had never exactly been hospitable or made for permanent living, so the catacomb I ended up in certainly didn't lower my anxiety any, being surrounded by half a dozen men and women who seemed ambivalent at best to mine Elmo's ongoing survival. The corridors were long and the walls were narrow. It felt like walking to an execution with all of us silently marching in one direction, and at least 3 times I had to pull myself back from a stupid decision involving forced heroics. I don't know what Elmo was thinking, but if I had to figure, this wasn't the adventurous tussle he'd had in mind. Eventually, we made our way back to a small but richly adorned room. Thick carpet stretched across the floor, while tapestries concealed the baroque starkness of the walls. A single man sat in this room, looking up with languid interest as we were brought in, and then smiling sardonically as the situation was explained to him. He had thick blonde hair that fell off his head in long cascading waves, and he beckoned his minions to leave, staring at us with eager anticipation. Prominent symbol adorned his armor in multiple places, a flaming eyeball. So, yeah, the two merchants. I started once the silence dragged on long to become uncomfortable.
Oh, no. Let's not start our relationship with a lie. I am Larenth, and I know very well that Davy and Grimeg wouldn't willingly send you. Revealing that we're here runs counter to their instructions, which means you misled them in some way if you found this place. So that leaves me with a question. What to do with you? Might you make a worthwhile minion, I wonder? Maybe I just put you to the question, learn what you know of the town. Perhaps I simply corral you into an infested part of this place. Watch you struggle against the beast for my men's entertain. Oh, screw this!
Elmo bellowed and struck forward, one meaty fist connecting to Laren's face and sending him reeling back. Larence immediately grabbed his staff and leveled it towards Elmo. Larence began chanting words of dark and malevolent power, and the staff started to glow, but thankfully, before the staff could activate and do whatever it was planning to do, I launched an Eldritch Blast and caught Larence in the shoulder. He looked at me in shocked disbelief, my leather armor and lack of component pouch having apparently completely convinced him that I couldn't possibly be a magic user. The distraction would prove to be his undoing as Elmo's big axe came down, catching Larence across the temple and sending him to an uneven heap on the ground, a low groan escaping him. I raised my hand to finish him off, but then I heard the door behind me come slamming open and let out a malignant grin as I turned to face the men behind me. Your leader sought to impose his will over me, but our dark master intervened. This made me a bit nervous. I had no idea who the blonde man served, only that he served something. It does not advance our interest to see him slain, but we will not be delayed by your foolishness further. I grabbed a book of what appeared to be Laren's journal from the desk, my movements confident as though I knew precisely what it was and that I needed it. Clear the way. To my immense relief, the various array of bandits glanced at one another in uncertainty, but none seemed willing to initiate an attack on an apparently powerful ally that had the favor of whatever it was they served. They reluctantly pulled away from the door and we made our way out of the room, up a slight incline that eventually panned out to a back exit from the compound.
That was awesome!
And that's it. Thank you, Rash'thyr. You're the best. Yes, snacks in the green room. Help yourself. This has been the Village of Hommlet. Like a lot of Gygax's modules, it's chock full of interesting ideas, and it's interesting to see how it led Dungeons & Dragons, and indeed tabletop RPGs to where they are today. But there are also a lot of issues from a modern perspective. One of the big ones is the layout. The maps are divided into individual rooms and houses, and details on the people within our catalog, but it feels like Gary was trying to make a living, breathing town rather than writing an adventure. Huge swaths of the populace feel incomplete, and the team is supposed to finish the work of giving them personality, hopes, goals, dreams, ideals. Also, perhaps the bigger issue is that there is absolutely no in-text way for the party to find the moat house. No NPC directs them to go there. The text at the beginning of the module indicates that bandit raids have been picking up, but then the module explicitly states the bandits never come within 4 leagues of the town, so that can't really be a direct call to action. Reading between the lines, my best guess is the party's meant to investigate why so many caravans don't make it to this village, but somehow stumble across the moat house from there, but there's no larger map provided and no details on specifically how this would happen, like shows up in the module anywhere. There's also a bit of an issue with the setup. The module indicates that a massive clash between the forces of good and evil left the Temple of Elemental Evil and associated moat house smashed to ruins some 10 years ago. But it also specifies that the party has absolutely no knowledge of this event, and that feels weird. Like, they talk about that the force that came for the temple was overwhelming to the point it initially bypassed the moat house. So this is just some massive grouping of powerful forces, and yet 10 years later, no one remembers that this occurred. It'd be like going to Germany in 1955 and not being aware that World War II ever happened.
I'm not seeing anything about German history between 1939 and 1945. There's just a big gap. Everyone was on vacation!
And lastly, this is less a problem than an unfortunate artifact of history, but it's super clear the town was set up with further intrigue available in the follow-up modules. But since Gary wouldn't actually publish anymore, much of that possibility is left as a question rather than a plot hook. For example, the module goes through a lot of pains to talk about which members of the town are devoted to St. Cuthbert, which part of the town follow the Druidic Circle. Was there meant to be a clash between the two on how to contain the temple? Why is Larence described as the dark hope of evil, if his role is to stand at the end of the level to be defeated like one of Dr. Wily's robot masters? Still, despite all the potential for improvement, I love the module. Most of the first edition modules, I actually think all of them that predated this one were largely affairs of you found a hole and when you go inside, here's the dungeon. This module is the first one that really puts the narrative build leading up to the dungeon. It has like significant NPC interaction requirements and the idea of a hub city outside of Mega Dungeon, even if the Mega Dungeon wouldn't actually show up for several years. I think these ideas would have come regardless, but I'm still really happy to have played this and seen how everything kind of came together.